Welcome in, everyone. It's January 18th, 2025, and we are in Washington, D.C. for a day that's shaping up to be pretty historic.
Huh?
We've got the eve of President-elect Trump's second inauguration, and at the same time, thousands are gathering for this massive People's March.
It really is a fascinating convergence
Yes,
of
sir.
events. Yeah, we're seeing not just the inauguration itself, but a collision of these two big narratives
Right.
happen at the same time. A real-time snapshot, I think, of a nation that is very much divided.
Yeah. On the one hand, we've got all the pomp and circumstance of the
Mhm.
inauguration, and then on the other hand, we've got this huge outpouring of dissent with the People's March happening simultaneously.
Right.
And it's not just a small group either.
No, not at all. Thousands are gathering at the Lincoln Memorial, according to the Associated Press, and they're coming from all over. Over 350 similar marches are planned all across the country.
Wow.
The name itself, People's March, is significant too, don't you think?
I do.
It evolved from the 2017 Women's March to this broader People's March, which seems to suggest a wider range of anxieties, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's like they're saying this isn't just about one issue or one group. It's about something much bigger.
Exactly. It reflects that broadening of concerns. And it's like all these different groups are forming a sort of coalition
Yeah.
around these anxieties about the direction of the country. It reminds me of other historical shifts we've seen in social movements when you see these diverse groups come together and their voices are amplified as they unite.
The AP is reporting on some of the chants from the march, and you can just feel the energy coming through.
Oh, yeah.
They're saying things like, what are we going to do? Stand up, rise up. I can only imagine what it's like to actually be there.
It does make you wonder, though,
Yeah.
what does this resurgence of activism really tell us?
Yeah.
What does it signify?
Especially
Especially in the context of, our shifting political landscape.
right.
Are we seeing a reawakening of civic engagement?
Yeah.
In response to all these perceived threats to democratic norms and individual rights? It's a question worth considering for sure.
Definitely. The AP is also sharing these personal stories
Yeah.
of people who've come from all over the country
Oh, wow.
to be a part of this march. And you can see they're trying to highlight this real diversity of voices and concerns. For example, they talked to Jill Parrish. She flew all the way from Texas, and she is expressing
Wow.
real fear for the future of democracy.
It's important to remember, though, that anxieties like Jill's aren't coming out of nowhere. We've seen this rise in political polarization,
Oh, absolutely.
and the rhetoric that we hear from certain groups is very targeted. This has really contributed to a climate of fear and uncertainty for a lot of people, especially those who are feeling like their rights and their freedoms are under threat.
Okay. So we have this incredibly powerful display of activism with the People's March. But at the same time, preparations for Trump's inauguration are going ahead. And even those are not without their own kind of twists and turns.
You're right about that. The swearing-in ceremony, which is typically this big spectacle on the National Mall, has been moved indoors to the Capitol Rotunda because of the freezing temperatures.
So instead of this massive outdoor event,
Right.
it's going to be a much smaller, more intimate gathering.
Exactly.
Doesn't that completely change the whole feeling of the event?
Absolutely. I think it does. It significantly reduces the number of people that can attend,
Yeah.
which could really impact the optics of it all. When we talk about optics, we're talking about the image that's being presented to the public
Yeah.
and how that influences the way people perceive the event, and in this case, Trump's second term.
It makes you wonder, how is this change in venue going to be interpreted? And what kind of message does it send? Is it a purely logistical decision because of the weather? Or is it something a bit more symbolic?
That is the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a really good one, and it's definitely something that we should discuss. And, the fact that all of this is happening against the backdrop of this huge protest just adds another layer of complexity to the whole narrative.
It's almost like we're seeing these two parallel universes
Yeah.
existing side by side.
It's true.
You've got this vibrant display of dissent in the People's March,
Yeah.
and then this more controlled, exclusive gathering for the inauguration.
And the AP even captured a few moments where these two narratives literally collided.
Oh, really?
Yeah, picture this. The march is passing by, and there's this group of men wearing Maggie hats.
Oh,
And suddenly, chants of "No Trump, no KKK" erupt.
wow, that sounds like a very tense encounter, to say the least.
It was. It's a stark reminder of how deep these divisions really run. And it's not just about, abstract political differences. These are fundamental clashes about values and identity. What does it mean to be an American in today's world?
It really makes you think.
It does.
What are the implications of seeing these two things juxtaposed like this? How will this shape the way we see Trump's second term going forward?
These are the big questions, and I'm really interested to unpack them further.
Me too. Let's get into it.
Okay. Moving the inauguration indoors is pretty intriguing.
I know, right? It's such a big change from the tradition of having this massive outdoor event.
Exactly. And it raises some interesting questions about, the message it sends.
Like, what do you mean?
Well, traditionally, the inauguration symbolizes this peaceful transfer of power.
Right.
And the new president takes the oath of office in front of everybody.
It's almost like they're saying, hey, look, we're all in this together.
Mm-hmm.
But when you move it inside, doesn't that kind of create this sense of exclusion?
I think so.
Like they're shutting out part of the American public.
Yeah, it definitely changes the optics of it all. Instead of this huge crowd, you've got this much smaller, more controlled environment.
Right. And that could definitely be seen as distancing the new administration from the people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially given all the anxiety we're hearing about at the People's March.
And then there's the practical side of things, too.
Right.
The Capitol Rotunda can only fit so many people.
Exactly.
So a lot of people who might have gone to the outdoor ceremony just won't be able to attend.
That's true. It makes you think about who gets a seat at the table literally in this case. Does this reinforce existing power structures?
Yeah.
Does it create more of an us versus them feeling?
It's almost like the physical space itself is mirroring what's happening politically.
Yeah.
A divided nation where some people are included and others are left out in the cold.
Literally out in the cold in this case.
Exactly. The symbolism is pretty striking.
It really is. And it's interesting to think about how this is going to be seen by both sides, Trump's supporters and his detractors.
Right.
The supporters might see it as a necessary security measure, given the current climate, but his critics could view it as him retreating from the public eye, almost like a sign of vulnerability or fear.
It really adds a whole new layer to everything that's going on today.
For sure.
You have this contrast between the openness of the People's March and then the very controlled environment of the inauguration.
Yeah, it's like two completely different worlds.
It's such a fascinating look at the political dynamics at play right now.
It really highlights the challenges of governing a country that's as divided as ours is. How do you address the concerns of those who feel marginalized while also appealing to your base and trying to maintain a sense of unity?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is, and it's a question that Trump is going to have to face throughout his entire second term.
The AP is capturing some pretty amazing images from the march,
Oh, yeah.
and you can just see the raw emotion in people's faces.
Yeah.
It's a mix of anger and fear and hope and determination.
It's a powerful reminder that these political events have a very real impact on people's lives.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in all the abstract debates and arguments.
It is.
But these are real people with real lives and real concerns.
And their lives are being directly affected by the decisions made in Washington.
For instance, the AP spoke to a man named Rick Glatz from New Hampshire.
Okay.
And he's marching with this sign that says, "I'm a grandpa. And that's why I'm marching." He's worried about the kind of world his granddaughters are going to inherit.
It's a sentiment that a lot of people share, I think. The sense of responsibility for future generations.
Absolutely. And it's not just coming from the older generation either. The AP also interviewed a young woman named Dakota Miller who drove down from Pennsylvania with her girlfriend.
Okay.
She's carrying a sign that says, "Proud of my trans sisters." And she's really worried about what a second Trump administration will mean for LGBTQ+ rights.
That's a really important point. It's not just about abstract political debates.
Right.
These issues have a very real impact on people's lives, their relationships, their sense of safety and belonging.
And it brings us back to something we talked about earlier, about how the People's March has evolved from the Women's March. It really shows how all these different groups are coming together.
Yeah.
Because they're worried about the same thing.
They see their rights and freedoms being eroded.
Exactly. And they all want to protect the progress that's been made.
It's interesting how these personal stories can bring those bigger issues into such sharp focus.
I know. It's like they remind us that behind all the headlines and all the political rhetoric, there are real people whose lives are being deeply affected by what's happening.
Absolutely. Their voices deserve to be heard. Their stories matter.
It's really inspiring to see so many people coming together like this to make their voices heard.
I agree. Especially when there's so much uncertainty and division.
It speaks to the power of collective action and how important civic engagement is.
Even in this digital age, there's still something incredibly powerful about people physically coming together and raising their voices as one.
It's like they're saying, we're here and we're not going away.
Exactly. And, the AP has also captured some lighter moments amidst all the tension.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, they mentioned the Willard Hotel, which is all decked out in flags for the inauguration.
Oh, that's right. It's a D.C. institution.
It is. And it's kind of a reminder that even in moments of political division,
Mm-hmm.
there's still this sense of national pride and tradition.
It's these little details that really add a whole other dimension to the story.
They remind us that history isn't this big monolithic thing.
Right.
It's a tapestry woven from all these individual threads.
Every person, every event, every image contributes to the bigger picture.
Exactly. It's fascinating to see how all these seemingly disparate threads are coming together today.
Yeah. It feels like a real turning point in history.
It does. And it's important to remember that history isn't some static thing. It's a dynamic process that unfolds in real time,
Mm-hmm.
and it's shaped by the actions and interactions of countless individuals.
So we're not just watching history unfold. We're part of it.
We are. What we do today will determine the world we live in tomorrow.
It's a powerful reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping the future.
As we continue to look at these individual stories,
Yeah.
I'm really curious to see what other insights we can glean. What do you think?
Let's dive in. It really is amazing how these personal stories can give you such a clear picture of what's happening on the ground.
Yeah.
The AP's reporting is doing a great job at bringing those voices to life.
I agree. It's those individual experiences that really drive it home.
Like they talked to this woman named Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
She's a single mom from Ohio, and she's marching for affordable health care. She's having a tough time making ends meet, and she's worried about losing her coverage.
That's a story that a lot of Americans can relate to, unfortunately. Healthcare access and affordability are huge concerns for so many people.
It's not just a political talking point. It's a real issue that people are dealing with every single day.
Exactly. And for people who are struggling to get by, it can feel like their whole world is on the line.
It's a good reminder that even in the middle of something like an inauguration where everyone's supposed to be celebrating,
Right.
there's still so many people who are facing these really tough challenges.
And that's why it's so inspiring to see them using their voices to fight for change.
Absolutely. It shows how strong the spirit of democracy is in this country.
Hmm.
That ordinary people can make their voices heard and hold their leaders accountable.
The People's March is a perfect example of that.
And it's not just about demanding change either. It's also about celebrating how far we've come.
Mm.
The AP captured this really beautiful moment between two women, Emily and Jessica, who got married last year
Oh, wow.
after same-sex marriage was finally legalized. They're at the march, holding hands with tears in their eyes, just so grateful for the rights they've won, and they're determined to protect those rights for the next generation.
That's what it's all about, isn't it? Fighting for a better future for everyone.
It's such a mix of emotions.
That is.
There's this feeling of celebration for everything that's been accomplished,
Yeah.
but there's also this underlying anxiety about what's going to happen next.
It's like this push and pull between hope and uncertainty.
Exactly. And I think that pretty much sums up what we're seeing in D.C. today.
On the one hand, you've got all this hope and possibility with the People's March.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, you've got this cloud of uncertainty hanging over Trump's second term.
As we wrap up this deep dive, what are your final thoughts? What do you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
I think the biggest takeaway is that history isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we're all actively involved in.
We shape it, and it shapes us.
Exactly. What's happening in D.C. today is a perfect illustration of that.
It shows how powerful individual voices can be, how important it is to get involved in your community, and how much work still needs to be done.
We can't just sit back and watch. We have to be active participants in shaping the world we want to live in.
And even though we're only getting these little glimpses of what's happening through these live updates,
Right.
it's obvious that this is a day that's going to have a huge impact on the future.
It is. It's a day that really captures all the complexities and contradictions of America.
It shows us how divided we are, but it also shows us how much hope there is for a brighter future.
I think that's a great point to end on.
I agree. So, to everyone listening out there, stay informed, stay engaged, and never underestimate the power of your own voice. History is being made right now, and we all have a part to play in writing the next chapter.